The first sign of trouble wasn't the sirens. In a level 1 trauma center, sirens were just the baseline rhythm of a Tuesday night. The first real sign was the silence that followed them. A hush fell over the ER as two military police officers, rigid and imposing in their dress blues, parted the sea of gurneys and worried families. Between them, medics wheeled a nightmare. Trauma Bay 1 now. Alara Hayes, Ellie to her friends, moved without thinking. At 26, she possessed a competence that belied her years, a calm woven from countless hours of controlled chaos. She saw the patient, young, athletic build, now a ruin of shredded Kevlar and blood-soaked fatigues. His face was pale as bleached bone, his breathing a ragged, shallow whisper. GSW to the abdomen and left femur, massive hemorrhaging, a medic rattled off. Pulse is thready, BP is 60 over palp. He's received 4 units of ONEG in the field. We need 4 more, stat, shouted Dr. Eris Thorne, the attending physician, his voice sharp and precise. Doctor? Thorne was a man who saw the ER not as a place of healing, but as a complex equation he was uniquely qualified to solve. People were variables, and protocol was his law of physics. A new kind of silence descended, colder and more dreadful than the first. A junior nurse looked up from the blood bank monitor, her face ashen. Doctor, we're out of ONEG. A multi-car pileup on the I-5 cleaned us out an hour ago. Dr. Thorne's face tightened. Check again. Call the other hospitals. I don't care what you have to do. Ellie was already looking at the patient's chart, then at the dog tags an MP had placed on the counter. Evans, Cole, blood type, ONEG. Below it, a second, smaller tag noted a specific antigen subgroup, Rh omega. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, coiled in Ellie's stomach. It was her blood type, the universal donor, but with a ridiculously rare subtype she only knew about because a Red Cross blood drive in college had flagged her as 1 in a million. He's crashing! Someone yelled. The long, steady tone of a flatline began to keen through the bay. Paddles, Thorne commanded, starting chest compressions. Ellie watched the life drain from the young Marine's face, a face no older than her own. She saw her brother, her cousin, the kid who used to bag her groceries. He was a person, a variable of one. And she was the only solution to the equation that mattered. It's me, Ellie said, her voice cutting through the noise. Thorne didn't stop compressions. What are you talking about, Hayes? His blood type. It's mine. O negative, Rh omega. I can do it. Thorne shot her a look of pure incredulity. Absolutely not. Protocol forbids direct staff to patient donation. It's an ethical and logistical minefield. You know that. Protocol is what's killing him, Ellie shot back, her voice ringing with a conviction that surprised even herself. The flatline tone was a physical weight in the room. He has seconds, doctor. We can argue about waivers and ethics while he's alive, or we can write a report about it after he's dead. Your call. For a moment, Thorne's analytical mind warred with the primal urgency of the moment. He stared at the dying soldier, then at the fierce, unwavering gaze of his nurse. With a curse, he barked, "Get a line in her, now, and get me every waiver form in this damn hospital. I want her signature in triplicate before a single drop leaves her arm." They laid her on a gurney next to the Marine, a thin curtain the only thing separating them. A nurse she'd known for years expertly found a vein in her arm, the pinch a small, sharp reality in the haze of adrenaline. She could hear the frantic work continuing on the other side, the clipped commands, the rustle of sterile packaging, the hum of machinery. She felt a connection to the unseen man next to her, a strange intimacy born of shared blood and circumstance. The blood bag began to fill, a dark, rich crimson, her life flowing out to save his. As soon as the first unit was full, it was rushed to Sergeant Evans. Ellie felt a wave of dizziness, but through it, she heard the words that made it all worthwhile. We've got a rhythm, sinus tatch, but it's there. BP is climbing. A collective sigh of relief filled the bay. When they finally wheeled Sergeant Evans up to the secure military wing, Dr. Thorne approached her gurney. He held up a small vial of her blood, the crimson liquid catching the harsh fluorescent light. "For the record, I'm writing you up for this insubordination," he said, his tone clinical. "But I've also sent a sample of your donation for a full workup. Your antigen profile is anomalous. I want to know why." Ellie barely registered his words, a faint smile on her lips. She had broken the rules, but she had saved a life. She went home exhausted, her body aching but her spirit alight, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, A sharp, authoritative knock echoed through her small apartment. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor or the thud of a delivery. It was a summons. She opened the door, still bleary-eyed and in her scrubs from the day before. Standing in the drab hallway, looking utterly incongruous against the peeling paint, was a man who seemed carved from granite. His army uniform was so crisp it could have cut glass, a single silver star gleaming on his shoulder. Flanked by two silent, imposing aides, he filled the doorway, blocking out the light. He didn't smile. His eyes, the color of cold steel, assessed her in a single, sweeping glance. "Miss Alara Hayes?" he asked, his voice a low, resonant baritone that commanded attention. "Yes," she managed, clutching the doorframe. "I am Major General Theron Vance," he said, the name and rank landing like physical blows. "We need to have a word about the blood you gave last night." General Vance didn't ask for permission to enter. He simply stepped across the threshold, and his aides followed, their presence instantly shrinking Ellie's modest living room. The apartment, her sanctuary with its second-hand furniture and shelves of nursing textbooks, suddenly felt like an interrogation cell. She closed the door softly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Vance surveyed the room, his gaze lingering for a moment on a framed photo of her and her parents before settling back on her. He exuded an aura of absolute power, a man accustomed to the world reshaping itself to his will. "Please don't be alarmed, Miss Hayes," he began, his voice softening into a practiced, disarming tone. "I'm not here to cause trouble. On the contrary, I'm here to express the profound gratitude of the United States Armed Forces." He gestured to one of the aides, who stepped forward and presented a small, velvet-lined box. Inside, a civilian service medal rested on a bed of satin. "For your quick thinking and selfless actions, you saved the life of a very important American soldier. You should be proud." Ellie stared at the medal, a wave of confusion washing over her. "Thank you, General, but this really isn't necessary. I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Vance chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Most nurses don't defy direct orders from their attending physician and break a dozen hospital protocols. What you did was something more. It was an act of patriotism." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Sergeant Cole Evans is a highly decorated Marine, a vital asset to our nation's security." He walked over to her window, peering down at the quiet suburban street as if surveying a battlefield. "He is also one of less than 24 active participants in a program of critical strategic importance. I'm telling you this because your unique biology has now made you a part of that program's ecosystem." Ellie frowned. "My biology? You mean my blood type?" "Yes, and no," Vance said, turning back to face her. "The Rh omega subtype is rare, but we have others with it on file. It was Dr. Thorne's detailed analysis that brought you to our attention. Your plasma, Miss Hayes, contains a unique protein marker, a complex regenerative enzyme we've only ever theorized about. We've spent billions trying to synthesize it in a lab and failed. And you just make it." The room felt suddenly cold. "Make it? What are you talking about?" "Project Aegis," Vance said, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "It's a bioenhancement initiative. We create stronger, faster, more resilient soldiers. But there's a flaw. When an Aegis subject sustains massive trauma, their enhanced cellular structure can collapse on itself. It's like a cascade failure. Your blood, specifically your plasma, doesn't just replenish what's lost. It actively arrests that cascade. It stabilizes and jumpstarts the regenerative process at a rate we've never seen. You didn't just save Sergeant Evans, you rebooted him." Ellie sank onto her sofa, her legs suddenly weak. This was beyond anything she could have imagined. "A super soldier program? And my blood is the key?" "The cure," Vance corrected gently. "And we need it. We need you." He gestured to the other aide, who produced a thick, leather-bound portfolio and placed it on her coffee table. He opened it, revealing a multi-page document filled with dense legal text. "This is a contract. It designates you as a priority civilian asset for the Department of Defense. It requires you to provide a donation of 2 units of whole blood and 1 of plasma on a bi-weekly basis, on call for emergencies. In return, you will receive a stipend of $2 million a year, tax-free, full medical, dental, and a housing allowance. Your student loans, mortgage, any debt you may have wiped clean. We will take care of everything. All you have to do is be available when we need you." Ellie stared at the numbers, her mind reeling. $2 million. It was an absurd, life-altering sum of money. It was freedom from the crushing weight of her student debt, a chance to help her parents, a life without financial worry. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of. And it was the price tag for her body. She looked from the contract to General Vance's expectant face. He wasn't offering her a job, he was trying to purchase a piece of her. He saw her not as a person, but as a biological factory, a walking, talking IV bag. The altruism of her act had been twisted into a commodity. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Vance's eyebrow twitched. "I'm sorry?" "No, thank you," Ellie repeated, pushing the portfolio back across the table. "I'm a nurse. I help people who need it. I saved that man's life because he was dying in front of me. I didn't do it to become a national resource. I won't be a blood bank for some secret military experiment." My answer is no. The manufactured charm in General Vance's eyes evaporated, replaced by a chilling stillness. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice low and devoid of any warmth, "I don't think you appreciate the gravity of the situation. This isn't a request you can simply decline, like a dinner invitation. This is a matter of national security. It's a matter of my own body," she countered, her fear giving way to a spark of defiance. "And I'm not for sale." Vance stared at her for a long, silent moment. He picked up the service medal, turning it over in his fingers. "A person is either an asset or a liability, Miss Hayes. Right now, you are an invaluable asset that is refusing to be utilized. That can quickly make you a liability." He placed the medal on top of the closed contract. "You should reconsider what duty really means. For your own sake." He turned and walked to the door, his aides falling into step behind him. He paused with his hand on the knob. "We protect our assets, Miss Hayes," he said, looking back at her over his shoulder. One way or another, the door clicked shut, leaving Ellie alone in the sudden, deafening silence of her apartment. The contract on her table felt like a bomb, and she had the terrifying feeling that the timer had just started. The pressure began subtly, a gentle squeeze before the chokehold. The day after Vance's visit, Ellie arrived at the hospital to find her name conspicuously absent from the trauma team roster. She'd been reassigned to pre-op, a tedious world of paperwork and routine IV placements. When she questioned the charge nurse, the woman wouldn't meet her eye, mumbling something about new rotations. The real blow came an hour later. A sterile, white envelope on her locker requested her presence in the hospital administrator's office. She walked into the plush, top-floor suite to find not just the administrator, a man named Henderson, with a plastic smile, but also Dr. Thorne, who was leaning against a mahogany bookshelf, a smug look of triumph on his face. "Ah, Ilara, come in," Henderson said, gesturing to a chair that felt miles from his enormous desk. "Dr. Thorne has brought some concerning issues to my attention regarding your recent performance." "My performance?" Ellie asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have a perfect record. A record that now includes a flagrant breach of protocol," Thorne interjected, stepping forward. "Your unsanctioned donation, while fortunate in its outcome, demonstrated a reckless disregard for the rules that ensure patient safety. It suggests an emotional instability that cannot be tolerated in a high-stress environment like the ER." Ellie stared at him, dumbfounded. "It saved his life. You were there." "What I was," Thorne said coldly, "was a witness to a nurse taking unacceptable risks. And now, I'm seeing a pattern. Yesterday, you were late logging a patient's medication by 3 minutes. Last week, you failed to double initial a waste log. Trivial things, on their own. But together, they paint a picture of someone who is distracted, unreliable. It was a complete fabrication, a weaponization of the mundane. He had been building a case against her." Henderson cleared his throat, his smile never wavering. "Our hospital has a long and very lucrative partnership with the Department of Defense, Ilara. They fund our entire West Wing. When a decorated general expresses concern about the stability of a staff member, we have to take it very seriously. We can't have anyone jeopardizing that relationship. You're on probationary review, effective immediately. I suggest you start being a team player." The message was clear. Cooperate with Vance, or her career was over. The professional isolation was immediate and brutal. Colleagues who had praised her bravery now averted their gazes in the hallways. Whispers followed her, a corrosive tide of rumors that she was unstable, a glory hound, that she was trying to sue the military for a payday. "Doctor?" Thorne became her personal shadow, a vulture circling her every move, pen poised over his clipboard, ready to document the slightest infraction. He wrote her up for using the wrong color pen. He questioned her dosages in front of patients. He was dismantling her reputation, piece by piece. The campaign of intimidation bled out of the hospital and into every corner of her life. A nondescript black sedan was always parked across the street from her apartment building when she left for work, and it was there when she returned. When she drove to the grocery store, a different one, equally anonymous, would follow her for 3 or 4 blocks before turning off. It was a calculated display of power, a constant reminder that she was being watched. Her mail was tampered with. An electric bill arrived opened. A letter from her mother never arrived at all. Her internet would slow to a crawl, then mysteriously fix itself. Then came the official notices. A letter from the IRS announcing a full, comprehensive audit of her last 5 years of tax returns. An official warning from her building's management company, citing an anonymous noise complaint and threatening eviction. Each was a paper-thin pretext, a bureaucratic jab designed to keep her off balance and exhausted. Sleep offered little escape. She'd jolt awake at the sound of a car backfiring, her heart pounding, convinced they were coming for her. Her life had become a low-grade psychological thriller, and she was the only one who knew the script. The breaking point came after 2 weeks of this relentless, quiet siege. She was driving home from a grueling shift when she noticed the telltale black sedan in her rearview mirror. On a desperate impulse, she swerved into the parking lot of the local police precinct. Her hands shook as she walked inside, the fluorescent lights of the station feeling like a beacon of safety. She explained the situation to the desk sergeant, a beefy, tired-looking man named O'Malley. She told him about the stalking, the harassment, the veiled threats from a general. He listened with a patient, almost bored expression, taking notes on a pad. "So you're saying a general in the U.S. Army is having you followed because you won't donate blood?" he summarized, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Yes," Ellie said, her voice cracking. "I know it sounds crazy, but it's happening. Please, just look into it." All right, calm down," he sighed, turning to his computer. "Let's see what we've got. Name? Elara Hayes, E-L-A-R-A. He typed it in. She watched the screen's reflection in his glasses as he scrolled. Then, he stopped. His posture, once slouched, straightened. The bored expression on his face was replaced by a hard, unreadable mask. He clicked his mouse a few more times, then slowly turned back to her. The paternal patience was gone. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and official, "there are no reports of stalking in your area. You're not being harassed." "But I just filed one. You saw the car." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," he said, his eyes like chips of flint. "This conversation never happened. You are not to waste police resources with these fantasies. Are we clear?" Ellie stared at him, a cold, sickening realization dawning on her. He'd seen a flag on her name, a warning, a hands-off notice. The system she had run to for protection was part of the cage. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered, her last shred of hope crumbling. Sergeant O'Malley leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "My advice? Go home, and do what the man asks. Some people are above your pay grade, lady, way above." She walked out of the police station, the comforting illusion of law and order shattered. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The black sedan was gone. It didn't need to be there anymore. The message had been delivered. Ellie's world had shrunk to the 4 walls of her apartment and the suffocating confines of the hospital. She was living on a knife's edge, a ghost in her own life. Every phone call made her jump. Every knock on the door sent a jolt of ice through her veins. The pressure was becoming unbearable, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. They were breaking her, just as Vance had intended. Desperation was a powerful motivator. Trawling through late-night internet forums, searching for stories of government overreach, she found a name that appeared again and again in the fringes: Marcus Cole. He was an investigative journalist, or had been. A series of high-profile and ultimately unprovable stories about corporate and government malfeasance had left his mainstream career in ashes. Now, he ran a small, subscriber-based blog from a dusty office above a laundromat, a digital ghost still haunting the machine. She found him there, surrounded by yellowing stacks of newspapers and smelling faintly of stale coffee and whiskey. He was a man in his late 50s, with a bloodhound's weary face, cynical eyes, and a journalist's ingrained skepticism. He listened to her story without interruption, his expression unchanging as she laid out the entire nightmare: the Marine, General Vance, the contract, Dr. Thorne, the police. When she finished, her voice raw with emotion. He leaned back in his creaking chair and steepled his fingers. A secret super soldier program, a rogue general, and a magic blood nurse, he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. It's a hell of a story, kid. Sounds like something I'd make up after my third bourbon. It's real, Ellie insisted, pushing a folder across his desk. These are the IRS notices, the eviction warning, my work probation report. Look at the dates. It's all coordinated. Marcus picked up the papers, his eyes scanning them with a professional's speed. He grunted. This is good circumstantial stuff, the kind of thing that makes people look guilty. But it's not proof. It's your word against a 2-star general. So you won't help me? Ellie asked, her heart sinking. I didn't say that, Marcus said, a flicker of the old reporter's fire in his eyes. I said it's a hell of a story, and I hate guys like Vance. Smug bastards who think the flag gives them a blank check to do whatever they want. He stood up. Leave this with me. I'll make some calls, rattle some old cages. But you need to be careful. If what you're saying is true, these people don't play. His words proved prophetic. General Vance had grown tired of waiting. The carrot had failed. It was time for the stick. 2 days later, Ellie was getting ready for another dreaded shift when the knock came. It was different this time. Heavy, insistent, official. She peered through the peephole, and her blood ran cold. 2 broad-shouldered men in paramedic uniforms stood on her landing. Behind them was a uniformed police officer, the same one who had been with them in the ER. His hand rested on his holstered weapon. She unlatched the chain, her mind racing. Can I help you? Alara Hayes? The lead paramedic asked, holding a clipboard. We have a court order for a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold. We're here to transport you to the county medical center for evaluation. He held up the paper for her to see. Her eyes scanned the text, the clinical language a brutal violation, exhibiting signs of extreme paranoia. Delusions of persecution. A danger to herself and others. At the bottom of the page were 2 signatures. The first was a judge she'd never heard of. The second was Dr. Eris Thorne. This was their endgame. Discredit her, declare her mentally unfit, and they could take whatever they wanted. She would have no rights, no voice. She would be a ward of the state, her body, their property. No, she whispered, backing away from the door. You can't do this. Ma'am, please don't make this difficult, the officer said, stepping forward. We have an order. It's based on lies, she cried, her back hitting the wall. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. They were closing in, their expressions impassive, just men doing a job. They were going to drag her from her home, strip her of her identity, and lock her away. Just as the paramedics reached for her arms, a commotion erupted down the hallway. Hey, what the hell is going on here? A loud voice bellowed. Marcus Cole came storming down the hall, his phone held up recording. Are you aware you're serving a committal order signed by a doctor who is in a professional conflict with the patient? That's a massive ethical breach. The paramedics and the cop were momentarily startled, turning towards the new threat. It was the only opening Ellie would get. Adrenaline surged through her. She bolted, shoving past the distracted men, yanking open the flimsy door to her fire escape and scrambling out into the cold morning air. Hey, stop! The officer yelled. She didn't look back. She clambered down the rattling metal staircase, her nursing clogs slipping on the rungs. She hit the alleyway pavement hard, stumbling but not falling. She could hear them shouting from above. She ran, her lungs burning, her mind blank with terror. She had lost her job, her reputation, and her safety. Now, she had lost her home. She was a fugitive, running from a system that had declared her insane because she had dared to say no. Ellie ran until her lungs burned, and her legs screamed, finally collapsing into the passenger seat of Marcus's rust bucket car parked 2 blocks away. He'd seen this coming. A source at the courthouse had tipped him off that Thorne had filed the motion. They're not just trying to silence you anymore, Marcus said, his voice grim as he peeled away from the curb. They're trying to erase you. He drove them to a grimy, pay-by-the-week motel on the outskirts of the city, a place of peeling paint and buzzing neon where people went to disappear. In the anonymity of that dingy room, the dynamic shifted. The fear was still there, a constant hum beneath her skin, but it was now joined by a cold, hard rage. They had taken everything from her. They had left her with nothing to lose. We can't hide forever, Ellie said, pacing the threadbare carpet. What's our move? We go public, Marcus declared, pulling a beat-up laptop from his bag. We light a fire so big they can't ignore it. I've held on to this for a rainy day. He pulled up the contact information for a former colleague, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist at the Washington Post named Sarah Jenkins. She owes me one, and she hates the military-industrial complex more than I do. He spent the next hour on a burner phone, laying out the entire story for Jenkins, his voice a low, urgent murmur. He emailed her copies of all the documents Ellie had provided, the probation reports, the threatening notices, and, the crown jewel, a copy of the falsified psychiatric hold order he'd managed to get from his source. Jenkins was hooked. The story was a bombshell. 24 hours later, it exploded. Whistleblower nurse accuses DOD of coercion harassment in secret program. The headline screamed from the front page of the Post's website. The story laid out Ellie's entire ordeal in meticulous, damning detail. It was picked up by every major news network within the hour. General Vance and the DOD were caught flat-footed, but their response was swift and brutal. They scheduled a press conference at the Pentagon. Standing at a podium backed by a row of American flags, Vance was the very picture of calm, authoritative leadership. He looked directly into the cameras, his expression one of paternal disappointment. "It is with a heavy heart that I stand before you today," he began, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "The story published this morning is a work of fiction, the tragic delusion of a troubled young woman, amplified by a disgraced journalist with an axe to grind." He proceeded to systematically assassinate her character. He painted her as an unstable opportunist who, upon learning the unique value of her blood, saw a chance for a massive payday. He claimed she had demanded an exorbitant sum, $10 million, and when the DOD refused, she concocted this elaborate story. "We have records of Miss Hayes's erratic behavior at her place of employment," Vance said, his voice dripping with condescension. Her own superior, the respected Dr. Eris Thorne, was so concerned for her mental state that he attempted to get her the help she so desperately needs. He held up a heavily redacted copy of her employee file. "This is not the story of a whistleblower. This is the story of a very sick individual, and we hope she gets the treatment she requires." Watching the broadcast from the motel room, Ellie felt a rage, so pure it burned away her fear. He was using her compassion, her very identity as a caregiver, as a weapon against her. He was twisting her trauma into a diagnosis. "That liar," she seethed. "He's making me sound crazy and greedy." "That's the point," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Right now, it's his word against ours. We need to fight back. We need them to see you." His plan was simple. There was no slick production, no fancy lighting. He just opened his laptop, turned on the webcam, and pointed it at her. Ellie looked into the small, blinking lens, imagining the millions of people who might see this. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. She wasn't a general or a politician. She was just a nurse, so she spoke like one. "My name is Alara Hayes," she began, her voice shaking but clear. "General Vance says I'm a liar. He says I'm greedy. He says I'm sick." She held up her hospital ID badge to the camera, her face next to her smiling photo. "This is me. I'm a registered nurse. My job is to help people. A few weeks ago, I donated my own blood to save a Marine who was dying. I didn't ask for a medal or for money. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Her voice grew stronger, fueled by her indignation. "The next day, that man," a picture of Vance appeared on screen beside her, "was in my apartment, offering me millions of dollars to become a living blood bag for a secret program. When I said no, they tried to destroy my life. When that didn't work, they tried to have me committed." She held up the committal order. "This is not a cry for help. This is evidence. They want to lock me away because they believe they own me. They believe my body is their property." She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes blazing with tears of anger and conviction. "General Vance says I'm unstable. So I want to ask you, is this what a hero of this country looks like?" She gestured to the image of the decorated general at his podium. "Or does this," she pointed to herself, a lone woman in a dingy motel room, "look like a citizen being hunted because she had the courage to say no?" Marcus uploaded the video to every platform he could think of. The effect was instantaneous and seismic. The video, raw and unpolished, possessed an authenticity that Vance's slick press conference lacked. It was the truth. It went viral in a way that defied algorithms. It was shared by nurses, by soldiers, by mothers, by anyone who had ever felt powerless against a faceless system. The hashtag #IamEllieHayes exploded, trending #1 worldwide within hours. The narrative had been ripped from Vance's control. The story was no longer his to tell, it was hers. The court of public opinion delivered its verdict with overwhelming force. Protests erupted outside military bases and federal buildings, crowds holding signs that read, "Her body, her choice," and "Stand with Nurse Hayes." Nurses' unions issued scathing statements condemning the weaponization of the medical system against one of their own. The story was a firestorm, and Washington was feeling the heat. Within a week, the Senate Armed Services Committee announced an immediate, full-scale investigation into Project Aegis and the conduct of Major General Theron Vance. The tide had not just turned, it was a tsunami. Subpoenaed and forced to testify under oath, Vance and Thorne were no longer confident commanders in control. Under the harsh glare of the committee room lights and the relentless, pointed questioning of the senators, their stories unraveled. Vance's claims of extortion were exposed as baseless, with no evidence of any such demand from Ellie. Dr. Thorne was forced to admit under cross-examination that his pattern of behavior reports on Ellie only began after her refusal to cooperate with the DoD. His professional credibility was shredded on national television. The final, decisive blow came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Cole Evans, the Marine whose life Ellie had saved, had made a full recovery, thanks in no small part to her blood. He had been following the news from his hospital bed at Walter Reed, his conscience tearing him apart. Defying a direct order from his commanding officers to remain silent, he submitted a sworn deposition to the committee. His statement was read into the record by the committee chairman, the words echoing through the silent chamber. He confirmed every detail of Ellie's story, the existence of Project Aegis, its inherent dangers, and the military's desperate, frantic search for a cure. Most importantly, he stated that General Vance had visited his bedside and referred to Ellie not as a hero, but as the asset and our new supply line. It was the nail in the coffin. The fallout was swift. Facing a dishonorable discharge and potential criminal charges, General Theron Vance was forced into a quiet, disgraceful retirement, his career ending not with a bang, but with the whimpering click of a lawyer's briefcase. Dr. Eris Thorne was fired by the hospital, stripped of his medical license by the state board, and buried under an avalanche of civil lawsuits. Project Aegis was indefinitely suspended, its assets frozen, and its entire leadership brought under congressional oversight. The government, eager to make the public relations nightmare disappear, offered Ellie a massive settlement, a confidential, 8-figure sum that would ensure she never had to work another day in her life. She met with the government lawyers in Marcus's cluttered office. She listened to their offer, then pushed the papers back across the desk. "I'll accept enough to cover Mr. Cole's legal fees and to reimburse me for my lost wages," she said calmly. "I don't want the rest." The lawyers were stunned. "But Miss Hayes, this is tens of millions of dollars." "I told General Vance I wasn't for sale," she replied, a small, confident smile on her face. "I meant it." Instead, with the support of a tidal wave of public donations and the backing of civil liberties groups, she did something else. She established the Hayes Foundation for Medical Autonomy, a nonprofit watchdog group dedicated to protecting the rights of individual patients and medical professionals against the overreach of powerful corporate and government interests. A year later, Elara Hayes stood at a podium, not much different from the one Vance had used to try and destroy her. She was the keynote speaker at the National Nursing School graduation ceremony. She looked out at the sea of bright, hopeful faces, all clad in white. "They will tell you to follow the rules," she began, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the auditorium. "They will tell you to obey protocol, and most of the time, you should. But a time may come when protocol and morality are in conflict. A time will come when a system, a boss, or someone with a fancy title tells you to do something that violates your conscience." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the young nurses. "In that moment, you will have a choice, not just between right and wrong, but between who you are and who they want you to be. They tried to turn me into a resource, a thing to be used. They tried to take my voice, but they failed, because one voice, telling the truth, is more powerful than an army of lies." She smiled, no longer a victim, no longer a fugitive, but a leader forged in the fire of injustice. "Your greatest duty is not to the hospital, or the system, or the rules. It is to your patient, and to the unwavering belief in the simple, unshakable integrity of doing the right thing. Be brave, be defiant, and never, ever let anyone make you forget that you are not for sale."